All right, I think we're ready to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. We're here today to talk about how Verado can help you get the most out of your customer master data management implementation with automated data stewardship, customer link repair, and the validation of incoming identities. Before we get started, I just wanted to get some housekeeping items out of the way. If you have any questions, you'll see a chat box where you can submit them. I'll field the questions and feed them to our speakers to answer at the end of the presentation. If you missed something or want to share this session with a colleague, we will be recording the webinar and it'll be available online after the show. I'll send you all links to the recording, so don't worry about that. I'd now like to introduce our two speakers, Jason Bayan and Joaquim Neto. Jason Bayan will start us off today, and as our VP of Commercial Sales, Jason brings over 11 years of experience in deploying MDM for dozens of large companies. He has an extensive industry expertise in healthcare, insurance, financial services, and retail. Next up will be Joaquim Neto, one of our most talented senior solutions architects. Joaquim has decades of architecture experience in information management and master data management across many industries. He has a particular expertise in healthcare with master patient index and health information exchange technologies. Both Jason and Joaquim worked at MDM Systems for many years before joining us here at Verado. And without further ado, I'll throw this over to Jason. Jason?
Thanks, Rachel. And thanks, guys, for participating today. As far as our agenda today, we're going to go over, really start off with kind of some background, setting up the stage for what the MDM markets look like, or has looked like, and is really sort of shaping up to look like. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges related to that market. It's a big market, as you'll see from some of the statistics, but there's obviously some very significant challenges and costly challenges about getting the most out of your MDM solution. And I'll walk through really the details of that and our perception of the challenges there. And then I'll turn it over to Joaquim, who obviously will introduce how Verado can really overcome that challenge and those challenges and really allow your MDM solution to meet its full potential and then really give you that business value. And then we'll wrap up talking about how we can get started and how we typically engage with some of our customers in this space. So without further ado, we'll talk, like I said, about the actual MDM market in general. So $1 billion is actually a prediction from Gartner in 2012 about the real size of the global customer MDM market, meaning the customer being a person, individual, patient, member, an actual set of eyeballs and a belly button walk around in the world. And that was their prediction in 2012. Sort of as a sort of follow-on to that, really at this point, and in some of our research, we found that about 98% of the Fortune 500 companies out there have installed a master data management system or capability in their enterprise. So just to really give you a perspective on how significant this market is and how many organizations really have attempted or deployed master data management for the core reason that a lot of their business success, their business processes, what they're trying to accomplish with their customers, whether it be sales or service, or some efficiencies in operating, or just a characteristic of their environment growing through M&A. It's really core, this capability around master data management and integrating customer data is really core to these companies being able to succeed in this sort of day and age. And that should be obviously clear by the statistics that I just went through. The past 10 years, it's also said that people invested about $5 billion in the MDM market. And the reason why, all of these numbers are really interesting and given what we're talking about today is because we don't feel like, and I think it's been the observation of many, that the MDM market has really met its real potential. It's really delivered on essentially a value proposition consistent with the amount of investment. As most people know, it's now almost, as it's matured, and I've spent a long time in the market, really kind of a business imperative, being able to create a loyalty program, to acquire another organization, to be able to deal with your customers through multiple channels. Mastering data or integrating customer data is really at the core of people's operations. It's not a nice to have, it's a business imperative. And like I said, that's evident from some of the numbers that I walked through, And it's evident from, as you can imagine, some of the pervasive nature of all of these business initiatives that you see here on the slide. It's really at the core of all of these things, of all of these sort of business initiatives. And now I've spent about 11 years, like I said, in deploying MDM, selling master data management solutions, working with customers that do that. And, you know, the business objectives that I talked about before, these loyalty programs or omni-channel, you know, servicing of your customer, all of those particular objectives, the core and fundamental real sort of capability that you need is really matching or integrating that customer data. So your loyalty program is not going to be all that valuable if you don't really know who your customer is and you haven't really integrated all the disparate repositories of your customers' transactions, interactions, and service interactions. So really at the core of all of those you know, business processes is really, and specifically with MDM, is the strength of the matching is sort of critical to meeting the objectives, critical to meeting the business objectives and getting real value out of it. And the problem with that, and this is a statistic that we tout often, we originally did a lot of research and came up with this statistic, but later validated through a significant amount of projects, but 30% of all the identity information stored in these disparate systems for these large organizations, whether it be a retail company or an insurance company, is really out of date or incorrect. And the notion that this information is, you know, inconsistent, it's out of date, or you know, incorrect, fundamentally erodes the value of an MDM program. And it erodes the ability for an MDM program to deliver on the business objectives that I talked about before. And this is sort of at the core of what we're going to talk about today, and at the core of what we're proposing with the use of Verado. So if you look at sort of these MDM matching engines, they typically have a lot of, you know, sort of, it's a complex algorithm or set of complex algorithms, but they all have sort of a specific inherent weakness when it comes to the data, and that's it really relies on the quality and the quantity of the identity information that these MDM systems have and these organizations have. So if you really look at the sort of core issue when it comes to MDM systems being able to accurately integrate customer data, you know, they all have, you know, very sophisticated phonetic, you know, matching approaches or search keys or edit distance functions. You know, they use historical values, they use weighting techniques and nicknames, name equivalency tables. So they all have that, and that really does a great job of addressing really only part of the problem, only part of the quality customer data problem. And so it'll deal with nicknames, it'll deal with inconsistent formatting, you know, correct or updated information, maybe it uses a historical attribute. But it doesn't really address pretty common scenarios of sparse data or family relationships, name changes, you know, out-of-date information. The simple scenario where a woman would get married, change her name, and move her address, and she has two records with a different name and a different address. That's a very simple scenario, a very pretty straightforward scenario. That's not like it doesn't happen all the time. These MDM systems are sort of incapable really of addressing that really sort of frequent situation or occurrence. You know, like I said, they do a good job, and what we say is finding about 70% of the true matches in the technology or in the disparate databases. So if you look at what they do, and they have all the complex algorithms that do this, you know, when attributes line up, they can align customer data and say with a strong probability, you know, two records are the same person. And they do this, based upon some of our analysis and based upon this notion that the data is really inconsistent or out of date 30% of the time, they can create these matches even when things don't align. So in the scenario where there's name equivalencies or phonetic matching, or there's some, you know, inconsistency with a phone number or a social security number, but they're slightly aligned, they also can identify a specific match and identify the unique customer. And then when things don't align themselves, and this is very common across all master data management solutions, they actually can create a suspect. They can create a candidate that says, looks a lot like another person, these records look a lot alike, but somebody manually should steward this data. And we say that 30% of the data that they could match that actually could result in the same person really falls into these manual queues for people to try to manually address and go through a stewardship program. So when we look at really the effort and energy to overcome the sort of core problem, that 30% of data that's inconsistent or out of date or inaccurate, organizations, and this goes back long before the master data management space started to take shape, but some people approached it from a minimal perspective, and they put the energy and amount of money and time into it, using some basic transformations and some basic sort of matching deterministic logic, and they got some of those matches. And then people got more mature and started to use some data quality tools and data quality toolkits to start really trying to reap the benefits of more aligned customer data, so they can make these matches, and that required more time and more energy and more money. Then they went through, obviously, the master data management approach, where we use very sophisticated, complex algorithms to do this matching process. That came at in some cases a considerable cost, a considerable amount of time, and a considerable amount of effort to get to, again, we're talking about 70% of the overall sort of available matches of customer identity. And then you combine that with the stewardship program, which is frankly the most labor-intensive approach to address this problem, along with, as it relates to the cost, pretty expensive proposition as well, that people manually deal with these situations, and it takes a whole lot of time. And then there's some organizations, and we have actually, in more recent news, there's been a couple different studies out there where people are going through some heroic or Herculean efforts to address the customer identity issue and address these inconsistent, out-of-date attribution about a person, where they're actually, maybe even physically calling and physically validating attributes about a particular individual. And then, define the rest of those, and to get to the rest of these, it's almost impossible. If you don't, at the end of the day, you're not going to get to 100% with the data, frankly, with the information that you have and that historically have captured about your customers. Just some of the stuff is not going to be possible. Now, if you look at the sort of spectrum of activity, spectrum of approaches that people have gone through, Verato's intended in its approach is intended to really reach maximum sort of rates of matching, optimize your ability to integrate customer information at sort of the minimal effort, time, and cost. And really, that's going to have a lot to do with, and I'm going to transition here in a second over to Joaquin to talk more about how we do this, but really about our approach, our technology, and really the change we've made in looking at this particular problem to address really the root cause of why other programs can't really get to this degree and this level of accuracy. And with that being said, Joaquin, I'll transition it over to you to take us through Verado and our approach and our technology.
All right, thanks, Jason. Thanks for the intro there, and just verify that you can see my screen here. Shout if you can't. So let me jump in and talk to you. First, I'm going to set the stage with sort of where Verado fits in your enterprise as an MDM, existing MDM client, existing user, and then I'll dive a little bit deeper into how we do what we do, our approach around referential matching with this carbon data asset that we have. So Jason, teed up the first solution we have, which is kind of very low cost of entry, very quick return on investment. And what that is simply is that we can automatically resolve the manual queue that gets kicked out from your MDM system. So if you're one of these customers who has MDM, generates this list of suspect matches or potential duplicates and links, but you don't have the capacity or it's costing you too much to work that manually, we offer a web service that will answer those questions about whether those persons are the same automatically, and we'll get a little bit further into that as we go along here. If you're a client who doesn't have an MDM who's set up to do this manual review process, maybe you're a very large enterprise with tens or hundreds of millions of customer records, and you knew that the trade-off or it just wouldn't be possible to manually work your exceptions, and you don't even have that as part of the MDM process, that's okay too. So we can basically point Verado at your existing installation, your MDM relationships you've established, and we can, what we call repair the linkages that you have. So we can see where you've missed an opportunity to link to your records or to deduplicate records, and using our referential matching approach, we can then deliver you those corrected answers. Then the third thing we'll talk about a little bit later as well is how we can help you cleanse the data on the way in. And by cleanse, I don't mean just validate that data is in the right format, but we can actually tell you if you've got the right data attribute values for your customer before those even get into your enterprise, before those feed into your MDM system, before you attempt to match them, so that it'll basically improve the quality of your data throughout its life cycle within your organization. So before getting into how those things work, let me tell you a little bit about our approach. So, Jason kind of teed up nicely with the background on what people have done historically to rationalize their customer information, starting with ETL and data quality based tools, and then moving to MDM, probabilistic matching tools, and adding on, human stewardship tools. We think we've got the next generation in that approach here, which is we combine big data, and by that I don't mean just big data technology, though we are built on a very modern big data stack, but also big data itself. So we have very large amounts of consumer information that we use as a trusted source of truth. And around that, we've built a set of algorithms that we call referential matching algorithms, which do the things you're familiar with as an MDM user, the advanced fuzzy matching techniques. But then with a whole layer of new things that we do that you can only do in the context of having a trusted source of information. That trusted source of information you see here on the right is what we call Carbon. And this is a database that we've built up by combining data from multiple different data sources. We basically start with data from credit agencies. So this is, credit header data. It's not your actual credit scores, but it's the demographics that you have recorded through financial interactions. And that kind of serves as the starting point for our definition of Carbon. That data is not as clean as you might think it is. So we apply our matching logic and our data cleansing routines to that. And then we add in other data that's unrelated to those financial information. So we have specifically gone out and found data that we diagonal data to the credit data. So these are things that are going to, fill in the holes for where there's not good information from the credit agencies. There are things where they'll provide attributes that we know not to trust from the credit agencies. So we get phone numbers, for example, specifically from some telco data sources. And then we get a variety of public records, other government legal records that give us other real-world information. Things like marriage name changes, which Jason talked about, is a good example. So we combine all of that together. We rationalize it into a single record per person in the U.S., and out comes Carbon, which serves as the centerpiece for our approach to matching. So if we look inside of Carbon, I talked a little bit about the breadth of information we have in there, the different types of demographics that we have about a person. One of the key things that allows us to do what we do is the fact that we have this data over time. So for all of our attributes, we have a longitudinal history of data. And you can see, especially in the case of something like an address, when you're trying to match data from different lines of business, where a customer may have been a customer of one line of business 2 years ago, and they've come in now in a different line of business, having something like a robust address history over time ends up making a big impact on your ability to recognize that person. So we've got these data values over time. And interestingly, we also have sort of a full set of information about a person. So we don't just keep the good data. You see the green lines on this chart are all the different variations of a name and address over time. We also keep bad data. So when we receive this data from our sources, we identify some pieces of information are of lower quality than others, and we actually retain that. We've got basically a data governance model where we evaluate how much we trust individual pieces of information, and then that comes into play when we do our matching downstream. And as it turns out, having sort of this full life cycle of data about a person, not just the current best name or the legal name, but all the variations they've used over time, good or bad, ends up being sort of a very powerful differentiator for us to get some results that you couldn't get just by looking at raw customer data. So to tell you a little bit more how this works, Jason introduced it a little bit earlier. In comparison to the sort of traditional pairwise matching techniques that you see in data quality ETL or MDM approaches, where you're looking at two records, maybe one from system A and system B, and you want to figure out if they're the same customer record. Well, you compare those, you line them up against each other, where you have the same attributes. You determine if they're close enough to be considered the same. If they are, then you get a match. Well, one of the biggest problems with that is when you don't have the attributes that line up, as Jason talked about before, it's just not possible to get a match no matter how sophisticated your algorithm is. So, in this example, if you had, let's just say you have a name and an address and an email on one record, and on the other record you've got a name and a birth date and a phone number. So, no matter what kind of mathematical techniques you apply to that, you can't determine that they're the same person. So the way we deal with that with Carbon is we take the first record, record A, and we match that to our Carbon identity. And if we match that on name and address and email, great, that works fine. The second record, we match the same Carbon identity using an entirely different set of attributes. In this case, name, birth date, and phone number. It didn't matter that your two customer records had this disparate set of information. We're able to match them to the same person in reality because we've got this, robust longitudinal person record inside of Carbon. So that really is it. There's a lot of nuances to that. I'll talk about some of the advantages. But in a nutshell, that's what we're doing and what's different about using a data source like Carbon, which we think the most comprehensive and best consumer person information data set there is for the purpose of identity in the U.S. Here are the couple things that kind of allow you to see what's different about this approach. We talked about the sparse data already in that last scenario. I introduced the idea that by having this robust history of correct and incorrect information, that gives us the ability to more easily see through errors and not get tricked by bad data that comes in on a given customer record. And the time example is the other one. I introduced that as well. What's interesting about the time aspect is we're not just keeping, say, a running history of the data attributes, but we actually store it in the context of the time. So what I mean by that is our address history is actually dated. And so we know when a person was at a given versus another address. So we know how far back in time an address goes. If as an organization, if you've ever invested in doing something like householding, you'd probably come up with some difficulties around, well, if two names have the same address, how do I know whether they're there at the same time or the same household versus two different people that rent in the same apartment at different times? So when we say being able to look through time, we actually mean that all of our attributes are sort of time stamped and we have this duration, and we can then infer lots of interesting relationships that helps us make difficult decisions, matching decisions, a lot easier. The last piece that's really interesting is this idea of matching by exclusion. So because we have this reference set, we know who everyone, we know who everyone is in the U.S., or to the degree that that's possible. We've got our comprehensive list of people. So when we're looking at a couple customer records and trying to figure out if they're the same person, we've kind of got the answer key. So an example would be, let's say you have two records and you're trying to decide if they're the same person or maybe they're husband and wife. So it's Michelle and Michael Smith, and you don't know if it's a phonetic typo or if there's actually a married couple with these similar names. Well, what a human might do, and in fact we see this in some organizations that really care about identity. A healthcare hospital organization may have personnel who would actually go in and use a third-party lookup search service to look up Michelle and to look up Michael, try to figure out if both those people exist in reality. If they do exist in reality, they might be able to see information that they're married, and that will help them make the decision. Well, that's exactly what we do, just automatically by bumping up against Carbon. So we look up Michelle, we look up Michael. If we find them both and they're married, that tells you one thing. If we know that Michael is single and has never been married to anyone named Michelle, then it's a lot easier to make the conclusion that it was simply a data error and those are the same record. So that's just one example. There's lots of other really cool things and interesting and powerful things that you can do with this matching by exclusion approach. Again, that relies specifically on having this reference data set as part of the equation. Okay, so real quick, coming back to this, common ways that Verado helps an MDM program. So this first one, the automated data stewardship. You've got your manual review queue sitting there. Maybe it's a couple 100,000 records long, and you've got 1 or 2 people picking them off, 100 a day. If you're doing that, well, you can simply feed that queue to us instead of applying that massive amounts of human effort. We generate basically a match or no match answer to you. Return that record to you. This is either a live web service that you can call, or we occasionally set up sort of batch services where we do it on a weekly basis or something for you. And we return the answer to you, which you then simply represent in your MDM system as a resolved decision. You keep track of your whole audit history. You can note that the user who made the decision was Verado. It fits easily into your MDM governance process. And that might not answer 100% of the tasks, but it takes it down to a small enough number that's either manageable or it gets you up to your 95, 98% accuracy level that you're targeting without having to expend all these human resources on it. The other one I mentioned was this idea of basically doing a checkup on your MDM, ensuring that it's linking everything correctly. So we can look at your existing MDM relationships, links that are in there. We can confirm the ones, that you can say, yes, we have the same answer. We can recommend additional updates too. So, the nature of the way we do this is we're using the data in Carbon to determine that 2 records represent the same person. But then we also understand why you didn't find the match. So the address history is a great example. When we do a match, we will record metadata that says, well, this match happened because one record had an out-of-date address compared to the other record. We know which record is the current address, so we can actually tell you some of that metadata that will help you improve the actual contents of your data, in addition to making the right matching decision. Potentially, we'll discover false positives depending how your data is set up, and get you on the path to fixing those. And then obviously the false negatives. So the cases where an opportunity to match 2 customer records was missed because we can see through those data changes over time or the discrepancies in the data elements that you have. This is where you get the big uplift and you go from 70 or 80% accurate to your 95 to 98 with those false negative fixes. The third kind of integration point that I mentioned here, which is again a pretty lightweight thing in and of itself, is to simply use Verado to validate identities on the way into your system. So that could mean out of user interface standpoint, at registration, at customer service, or it could be in the line of your processing as you're loading data into MDM. Both those scenarios are valid. So the things you can do, even apart from the matching, you can use our service and you can query Verado and you can find out if this person exists. So there's some fraud use cases. MDM programs are often justified by, by fraud use cases. You're trying to prevent fraud. Verado can tell you whether we find your customer record. We can tell you whether that person exists or not. We can also tell you whether you've got the right information about that person. So, we can look at the attributes that are coming in, and if you're creating a new banking customer, we can tell you, well, we found that person, but you didn't give us the right social security number, so you should double check, you should ask again. Or we can even offer fixes to data in certain cases. So you're registering a new customer, creating a new customer record. They give you their nickname that they go by. They go by Tiny, but the real name is James. We look them up and we find out that here's their legal name. We can offer that back to you for you to manage as an alias attribute, let's say. As that then flows down through your ecosystem, you'll be able to better identify customer, better do analytics on them, all those types of things, just by having inserted us, at this one entry point up front. And then the other big thing you can obviously do at this point as well is you can get an ID. So, we have our unique identifiers for every person. So there's models where you can call us. We can give you our Verato ID, and then you can use that throughout your downstream processing as well. So it either goes into your MDM as, kind of a known identifier that links records together, or maybe you take that and you put it straight into the warehouse. We see clients who, have new marketing analytics initiatives and can't get the view of a customer they want from an existing MDM system. They could get that view from Verado simply by integrating our Verado ID into their analytics environment. Is another example of this validated service. So what can you get? What benefits can you get out of this using those techniques? This was a pretty interesting project that we did for a federal healthcare customer. What was really interesting was that the nature of this data set was there was basically a source of members, 44 million records, and then we had a database or a file of information that should match up one-to-one with database B. So every record in our 3.1 million set was supposed to be found in 44 million. So it was really neat in that, again, you had to sort of answer key idea. We knew what the target was. So with the incumbent MDM solution that they were using and had invested a lot of dollars and time configuring algorithms with and things like that, they'd been able to match 2.2 million of the 3.1. They knew they were well short of the target, so we came in, ran the same data set through Verado, and were able to get them up to basically 98% conclusive rate, meaning those weren't just all the matches. Some of them we were able to rule out as not being a proper part of that 44 million data set. So that was a very tangible result of what Carbon can deliver. The other use case I want to just run through here quickly before we get to the end is an HIE that we are working with and have already delivered results to. They brought us in. They'd onboarded a number of hospitals to their HIE, some smaller hospitals. When they got to the largest hospitals in their county, they all of a sudden had hundreds of thousands of tasks generated as potential link tasks, and they did not have the capacity to resolve them. So as an HIE, they don't have full-time staff that can work these manual review tasks, and they were worried that left unresolved, there would be a big impact in the actual effectiveness of exchanging healthcare records across the county. So we came in and we simply did the auto stewardship. They extracted their queue of tasks, sent them to us. We replied back with, yes, these are a match. No, those aren't a match. They automatically process those in their MDM system, their master patient index system, resolved those tasks. 75% of those tasks were resolved automatically. And then on top of that, they asked us to take a look at the potential matches that they hadn't even put in their queue. So, their premise was, well, if you're able to resolve 75% of things that are in our queue, how many did we also miss that didn't even make it to the queue? So we basically did a full workup of their MDM system, and in the end, essentially doubled the number of matches that they had made, which was a huge result for them as far as being able to get buy-in from their constituents across the county to start using the HIE system. So, Jason, I'll hand it back over to you if you want to spend a couple minutes talking about how we typically engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to start engagements with customers, and typically a lot of people will come to us and say, "This is compelling. This is interesting. We obviously want to maximize the value of our MDM solution. Where do we start?" And typically, where we start is with a diagnose. It's a product that we offer our customers, our prospects, where essentially we can come and assess the efficacy of your MDM solution, right, and what it's doing for you. So we can obviously look at the data stewardship items that you have in your installation. We can quantify those, or we can automatically resolve. We can even do an analysis of, what more matching can we do? What false negatives, which mismatches amongst the data in your MDM solution can we identify and say you can get an uplift from using Verado? And then lastly, we can even go through and really back to the sort of core issue here is assess really the quality of their underlying customer identity demographics. So we can give a perspective of what is the correctness, validity of all of the names and the addresses and the phone numbers and the dates of birth that you have within your MDM solution. And that really just goes to the extent of painting the picture of why potentially it's going to be challenging for you, and it likely is challenging for you, to maximize the effectiveness of your MDM. All of this, this diagnose process that we have, that we offer to our customers, and we're engaged in several of these things right now, is really designed to help you quantify how you can maximize the value of your MDM. You spend a lot of money from our own personal experiences, Joaquim and I. We've seen this. People have spent years deploying an MDM solution that is designed around specific business processes that are significantly impactful to the business. Right? These are things at the core of how you service, how you sell, how you interact with your most prized possessions, your customers. Our program and our ability to help maximize the value of MDM is designed to do exactly that, is to essentially prop up and improve what you're already doing in a obviously very direct, very time compressed, and a very sort of labor intensive effort, being a cloud solution. So we can quantify that problem, quantify the value via this diagnose process. So I think that's it. Rachel, do we have questions from the audience here?
Yeah, we have a couple questions. I'm pretty sure, probably for Joaquim. The first question is, when you give back auto steward answers, do you just say yes or no?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, the most important thing, which I mentioned, is a yes or no answer. But then, like I said, as we run these data through our match process, there's a variety of metadata that we capture that characterizes the match. So again, some things that familiar with MDM and other matching technologies will recognize things like the confidence score. Was this an absolute kind of perfect match, or was this a high confidence but slightly lower than perfect match? So there's kind of the match score concept. Then there's some other things that you only get with a referential matching approach with something like Carbon. So one is the data elements themselves that we matched on. So as I mentioned, in some cases, if we used a secondary name, an alias name, we can actually tell you what that name was. In the case of addresses, we can respond with the address that was the current as opposed to the out-of-date address. So these additional pieces of information that you can either use to improve your customer data, or you could use to incorporate in some additional business rules on your side once you receive that yes/no answer. Some that could be useful to you for your own business logic on top of it.
Okay, great.
Question.
We have a few more. If anyone else has questions, there's a chat box you can use to submit them while we still have our two speakers on the line. Another question we got is, Can Verado work with any MDM system, or do you have a list of partners that you work with specifically?
Yeah, another good one. So we are definitely MDM and ETL and other information management product agnostic. So our integration points are very simple. We're a true cloud-based software as a service solution. So we have APIs that are easy to interact with. We do have some experience with particular MDM systems. So having some components, knowing exactly how to pull out the queue of tasks from your suspects queue. We've done that with certain MDM installations already, and so that would be kind of an accelerator. But very much, no matter what your MDM system is, or if you don't have one, we can fit in there.
Okay, great. And we're running out of time here, but we have two more questions about Carbon specifically. One is, how far back does the Carbon data go? And the second is, do you have household information in Carbon?
Great. Yeah. So Carbon history is actually very robust. In some cases, going back literally decades. We've got data from these sources that we subscribe to. We've got the history going back, like I said, up to 20 years in some cases. That also raises another point that I failed to bring up before, which is the currency of the data. So the other side of the history. So we get data from some of our sources on a monthly or weekly basis, and so it's very current. So things like address changes and phone number connection, things like that. We update. I think the number was 60 million a month of records that we update. So in addition to have that long history going back, it's also quite current. And then the other question you asked there, householding. So yeah, so as far as relationship information goes, we have both relationships that we sort of get from our data sources, so explicitly defined, and then we also infer some relationships. So essentially we do our own sort of types of householding to include relationship information. That's part of our Carbon model, is understanding those relationships between people as well.
All right, thanks, Joaquin. I think that's all for today. If you have any more questions, you can always send us a quick email, but we'll be in touch. Thank you so much for coming, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.